The water you drank today has been on an incredible journey. It might have been in a dinosaur's body 100 million years ago, fallen as snow on ancient civilizations, or evaporated from a tropical ocean and condensed into a cloud before ever arriving in your glass. But how? Well, Earth recycles the same water over and over again through the water cycle. Welcome to Sciesmic. I'm Matt, and today we're exploring the hydrologic cycle, or water cycle, the continuous movement of water through Earth's systems. Water constantly cycles between oceans, atmosphere, land surface, even underground and through living things. Understanding this cycle is absolutely essential for understanding weather, climate, ecosystems, and why water resources matter so much. Let's follow the flow of water on its endless journey. Before we explore the cycle, let's see where all Earth's water is right now. About 71% of Earth's surface is covered by water, but it's not evenly distributed. About 97% of Earth's water is salt water in oceans, which is too salty to drink or use for most of our purposes. Only 3% is fresh water that we can actually use. But here's the catch. Most fresh water is frozen in ice caps and glaciers, about 68% of fresh water. Another 30% is trapped underground as groundwater. That leaves less than 1% in our lakes, rivers, soil, and atmosphere, the water that we see and use every day. The amazing thing? The total amount of water on Earth stays roughly constant. Water doesn't leave Earth or come from outer space. We're using the same water that dinosaurs actually drank millions of years ago. The water cycle just moves that fixed amount between different locations and states and seemingly across time. Water moves continuously between four main reservoirs: oceans, atmospheres, land surface, and underground. Let's see how. The water cycle involves four main processes that move water between Earth's systems. Think of these as water's journey stages. First, evaporation. Liquid water turns into water vapor gas and rises into the atmosphere. This happens when the sun heats water in oceans, lakes, rivers, and even puddles. The water molecules gain energy and change from liquid to gas. Second, condensation. Water vapor cools and changes back into liquid water droplets, forming clouds and fog. As warm, moist air rises and cools, water vapor condenses into tiny particles in the atmosphere. Third, precipitation. Water falls from clouds back down to Earth as rain, snow, sleet, or even hail. When water droplets and clouds combine and grow heavy enough, gravity pulls them down. Fourth, collection. Water gathers in oceans, lakes, rivers, and even underground. Some water runs off the surface into streams. Some soaks into the ground and percolates down. Eventually, it all returns to the ocean or evaporates again, continuing the cycle. These four processes work together in a continuous loop powered by the sun's energy and Earth's gravity. Water constantly moves between liquid, gas, and solid states as it cycles through Earth's systems. Now, let's zoom in on evaporation, the process that starts water's journey upward into the sky. When the water is heated by the sun, it gives water molecules enough energy to break free from the liquid and become a gas. In liquid water, molecules stick together. Heat energy makes them move faster until some escape into the air as invisible water vapor. This happens most at oceans, which cover most of Earth's surface and store most of our water. Evaporation happens pretty much everywhere. There's liquid water, lakes, rivers, soil, even your wet hair after a shower. Factors affecting evaporation include temperature. The hotter it is, the faster evaporation happens. Wind, which moving air makes it happen faster. And humidity, the drier the air, the faster it is. But there's another important way water enters the atmosphere: transpiration. Plants absorb water through their roots and release it as vapor through these tiny pores in leaves called stomata. This is like plants basically sweating like you and me. Transpiration moves huge amounts of water. A single large tree can transpire hundreds of gallons per day. Scientists have often combined evaporation and transpiration into just one term, and they got really fancy with it: evapotranspiration. Right? Scientists don't have the most clever names sometimes. Forests are like giant water pumps, moving groundwater up through the trees and releasing it as a vapor. Amazon rainforest transpires so much water, it creates its own rain clouds. Isn't that crazy? Once water vapor is in the atmosphere, it rises because it's less dense than the surrounding air. As it rises higher, something important happens. It begins to cool down. Air temperature drops about 6 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 meters of increased altitude. Cooler air can't hold as much water vapor as warm air. When the air cools enough, water vapor condenses back into tiny liquid droplets. But water vapor needs something to condense on. In the atmosphere, it condenses onto tiny particles called condensation nuclei. These are dust, salt crystals from the ocean spray, or pollution particles. Water droplets form around these nuclei. Billions of these tiny droplets together form visible clouds. Each droplet is microscopic, about 0.01 millimeters, but together they reflect sunlight, making clouds visible and often white. Now, different clouds form at different altitudes and different temperatures. High cirrus clouds form where it's so cold that the water freezes into ice crystals. Lower cumulus clouds form from water droplets. Each cloud type tells us about those atmospheric conditions. Clouds are made of tiny droplets that float in the air, but when droplets collide and merge, they grow larger and heavier. Eventually, gravity pulls them down into what we call precipitation, or rain. Now, the type of precipitation depends on temperature. If it's warm all the way down, water falls as rain. If it's below freezing, water freezes into snowflakes. Sleet forms when rain freezes while it's falling. Hail forms in strong updrafts that carry ice particles up repeatedly, constantly adding new layers. Precipitation distribution varies dramatically across Earth. Some places receive over 400 inches of rain per year, like parts of Hawaii and India. Deserts might get less than 10 inches annually. This uneven distribution creates Earth's different climate zones. Mountains affect precipitation patterns too. When moist air rises over mountains, it cools and drops precipitation on the windward side. The leeward side becomes a rain shadow, which is much drier. This explains why one side of a mountain can be lush and covered in forests, while the other is a desert. When precipitation reaches Earth's surface, it takes several paths, and this is where the cycle gets interesting. Some water flows off the land as runoff, following gravity downhill into streams and rivers. Runoff eventually reaches lakes or oceans. The land area that drains into a particular river system is what we call a watershed. Now, some water infiltrates or soaks into the ground through soil and porous rock. This becomes soil moisture that plants use or groundwater that fills up our underground aquifers. Infiltration rate depends really heavily on soil type, the type of vegetation in the area, and ground saturation, so how much water was there to begin with. Groundwater moves very slowly through these pores in rock and soil, sometimes just inches per year. It can remain underground for thousands of years before ever emerging in springs, feeding the streams, or even pumped up from wells. What percentage takes each path depends completely on the surface. Forests promote infiltration because roots create channels and leaves slow runoff. Pavement prevents infiltration, sending almost all of our water to runoff. This is why cities have more flooding or water that can't soak in. Now, whether water flows as runoff or moves as groundwater, it all eventually returns to the ocean or is evaporated again. The cycle continues endlessly. Now, what powers this whole entire cycle? Look up, it's the sun. Obviously, don't stare at it, but solar energy drives evaporation, which starts water's journey. Without the sun, water would stay frozen in one place essentially forever. The sun heats Earth's surface unevenly. Oceans absorb huge amounts of solar energy. This energy breaks water molecules free from liquid water, causing evaporation. It takes a lot of energy to evaporate water. Gravity provides the other essential force. It pulls precipitation down from the clouds and pulls runoff down the hill into the streams and the oceans and down into the ground. Gravity is why water flows from high to low elevation. Now, together, solar energy and gravity create a heat engine. The sun lifts water up through evaporation. Gravity pulls it back down through precipitation and runoff. This endless cycle distributes water and heat all around our planet. Now, the water cycle also regulates our temperature here on Earth. Evaporation cools surfaces as water takes heat energy with it. Condensation releases that heat in the atmosphere, warming the air around it. This heat transfer affects weather patterns and climate. Now, of course, humans have significantly impacted the water cycle in a few different ways. Understanding these impacts is absolutely crucial for water management. Dams alter natural water flow, creating reservoirs that increase evaporation from larger surface areas. They change when and where water flows downstream, or if it flows at all, and this affects ecosystems and water availability. Deforestation removes trees that transpire huge amounts of water. This can reduce rainfall in a region and can increase runoff since fewer roots hold soil and slow the water flow. Urbanization covers land with pavement and buildings. Remember, those aren't very porous. This prevents infiltration, increasing runoff and flooding while reducing groundwater recharge. Cities need storm drains because water can't soak into the concrete. Groundwater extraction for agriculture in cities can deplete aquifers faster than precipitation can recharge them. Some ancient aquifers took thousands of years to fill, but are being emptied in just decades. Climate change is intensifying the water cycle too. Warmer temperatures increase evaporation rates. Warmer air holds more water vapor, leading to heavier precipitation events. Some areas face more droughts while others experience more floods. Now, understanding the water cycle helps us manage water wisely. Conservation, protecting watersheds, maintaining our forests, and allowing groundwater to recharge are all ways we can work with the water cycle rather than against it. The water cycle is Earth's circulation system, just like your blood, constantly moving water between oceans, atmosphere, land, and living things through evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and collection. Solar energy evaporates water from the surfaces, and plants transpire it from leaves. Rising water vapor cools and condenses into clouds. When droplets grow large enough, they fall as precipitation, fueled by gravity. Water collects in oceans, lakes, rivers, and underground before eventually evaporating again. Earth's water is constantly recycled, but never created or destroyed. We're using the same water that's been cycling for billions of years. Every drop has an incredible history to it. This cycle is absolutely essential for life, weather, climate, and shaping Earth's surface. It distributes heat, creates weather patterns, erodes mountains, and brings water to all living things. Who knows? Maybe you'll become a hydrologist, studying water resources, a meteorologist, forecasting precipitation, or an environmental engineer designing sustainable water systems for us to use. Now, don't forget to subscribe for more science videos, and let us know down in the comments what surprised you most about the water cycle. Thanks for exploring Earth's water journey with Sciesmic. Want to explore more about Earth systems and water resources? Check out Sciesmic.com, where every student can learn, grow, and achieve.